Hey, I'm John Cannell, and today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making easy, amazing coconut macaroons. So let's get started. First off, set that oven to 325, grab a baking sheet and line it with parchment paper or a Silpat. Important, and I'll tell you why later. Into a large bowl, I'm adding a 14-ounce bag of one of my very most favorite things in the world, sweetened shredded coconut. I love coconut, and this recipe is one of my favorites. So, plop that right in, just break up those big clumps. You'll be able to mix things in more easily later. On the blog, I get so many questions about macaron versus macaroons. A macaron is a finicky French cookie that is delicious, and you can click up here for my video on how to make them. A macaroon is actually closely related, but so much easier to make. You're gonna see this today. Into this bowl, I'm adding 14 ounces of my second favorite ingredient in the world, sweetened condensed milk. This is amazing in your coffee in the morning. This with some espresso, it's a chef's kiss of delight. And this stuff is very thick. Every batch I've gotten this year of this stuff has been like super thick. So I'm gonna grab a spatula. Today we're making coconut macaroons. There are many types of macaroon recipes, or macaron recipes, it really depends because it gets murky. They come from the 14th century, and originally it was ground almonds, just like in a macaron. Over time, various things were added. Some of them have like candied fruit, some of them have chocolate, some of them have coconut, and then eventually there's a variety like this, where there's no almond, just coconut. They became very popular among Jewish people because they have no grains, so you can have them during Passover, and they're so delicious, they became a year-round treat. Half a teaspoon of salt in here. This will give us some contrast. I'm also adding in about a teaspoon of vanilla. This gives you a little extra flavor. We're gonna stir this up. I really just wanna make sure that sweetened condensed milk is coating everything. And I have a confession to make. I used to think I didn't like coconut macaroons because they were dense, they were dry. I was just like, ugh, these are garbage. But then I found out that much like conchas and many other goods that you can buy, they were just old and stale. They were old, stale macaroons. Of course they weren't delicious. They were still sweet, but they weren't great. When you make these at home, they are light, chewy, amazing, soft, delicious treats. I swear you're gonna be hooked on these and just finish off the whole batch in no time. This is like a can't go wrong recipe as long as you don't overbake them. Go ahead and add things that you love. Do you love like pecans? That would work, why not? Do you want some extra spices? Sure, a drop of brandy? Why not? It all works out. And if you wanna go even more traditional, yeah, you can add in some ground almonds in here too. This is all mixed up. If I just plop this onto a baking sheet, it would taste good, but we need to have volume in here. Light, amazing dish. So we're gonna grab a clean bowl and some room temperature eggs. I also want a mixer. You could use a hand mixer like this or a stand mixer. They're both gonna work fine. I also need a little bowl for my yolks. So here's the deal. I'm gonna separate my eggs now. So the egg white goes into the big bowl. Oftentimes I'll just use that. This yolk broke, so I got away with it by the skin of my teeth. I'm just gonna do what I should. Sometimes you get eggs that just wanna fall apart on you like this. So you have yolk that's breaking, and this can't have any yolks in it if you want them to be as amazing as possible. There we go, one at a time. I only needed 2 eggs for this. These macaroons are way easier than a macaron, but there is the same trick for both of them. One of the things that can happen when you're making a French macaron is like, if you don't whip the egg whites up, they're just gonna spread out and become little blobs, which is so frustrating. They're still gonna taste good, but the texture's off, they don't look right. It's like, oh, it's the whole thing. These macaroons are like foolproof, but you really do have to whip your egg whites up because they're also gonna give you some body. If you just introduce runny egg whites in, they'll spread out and they won't have that classic mound shape. We're gonna beat these egg whites for about 3 minutes until we have stiff peaks, and I'll show you what that looks like. In Puerto Rico, these guys are called besitos de coco, coconut kisses, little coconut kisses, which is so cute. And then in Turkey, their version uses almonds, specifically they use bitter almonds as well. They're really popular all over the world with so many variations. It reminds me of Mexican wedding cookies, also known as curembieres in Greece. If there's a variety of macaroon that you grew up with, please let me know in the comments. I am so eager to try all the different varieties out. They're all delicious, I tell ya. These guys look nice and stiff, and I can tell 2 ways. One, you can see The meringue is just up, nice vertical. I could also, without fear, lift this over my head. It's not gonna fall. It is a stiff peak, and this is what we want to fold in so our macaroons really maintain their shape and have a beautiful mound, because within that mound is a wonderful, light, chewy texture. Sometimes you gotta know when to hold them and know when to fold them. I'm full of these horrible jokes here all day. I'm gonna fold the egg whites into this mixture. I will do this in 2 batches. Whenever you have a really thick mixture like this and light, fluffy egg whites, and you can see how stiff they are, they just hold their shape. Adding them in batches is a good idea. The first batch is somewhat sacrificial because it's gonna lighten your mixture up. And in doing so, the second batch will preserve a lot more of this volume, and those air bubbles won't be crushed because the mixture is now not so dense. If anyone is a science teacher out there watching and wants to have a little lesson on density, this could be kind of fun. Just gonna put that out there. Or conversely, if you have a science teacher and class is a little boring, you could ask them to bake some recipes and talk about density and volume. Just gonna put that out there too. Now my second batch is getting folded in, and you'll see a lot more volume will be preserved. And these egg whites are what give our macaroons that wonderful texture. Stored in an airtight container, your macaroons will last about a week, but you can freeze them for up to 3 months. Just make sure they are completely sealed so there's no freezer burn involved. They are, though, in my opinion, best fresh. Oh my gosh, look at this texture. It totally changed now. Do you see how it can just slide around? That is like a coconut cloud of deliciousness. You're gonna grab a 1.5 tablespoon triggered scoop, or you could use spoons too. I'll show you how to do that. We're gonna scoop these out onto our baking sheet. I wanted to line this with parchment or Silpat. One, they could stick. And honestly, if you can get a Silpat or a silicone mat, like any kind of brand, they are so handy. Nothing sticks to them, and they really give you a little bit of insulation so you don't get that browning on the bottom of your cookies and treats like coconut macaroons. There are a couple different ways that you could finish these. I'll show you after they bake up, but they're all delicious. There's not much spreading, so you don't have to worry about them oozing together. What you do want is to have air flowing in between them so they bake evenly. So don't crowd them out too much. I don't want to pack them into the scoop too much because then you'll lose a lot of that volume from your beautiful egg whites. Okay, now I'm just gonna use my spatula to corral them back into shape. There we go, just clean them up a little bit so they're not hanging out. If you have a lot of flyaways, they can get too crispy or even burn in the oven. For our second tray, I'm actually gonna plop these out onto parchment paper just to show you how they bake differently. And you can see if it's worth it or not to get a silicone mat for your baking. Fill that scoop up, but don't press it down. I wanna maintain my clouds, my little coconut clouds. We're gonna bake these guys up 1 tray at a time at 325 Fahrenheit for 20 to 25 minutes, or until the tops and edges are taking on a beautiful golden color. Then let them cool in the pan. And you really wanna avoid over baking these macaroons because they will dry out and lose that wonderful, soft, cloud-like chewy texture. So just until they're taking on some color and getting a light golden color, keep an eye out. I wanna show you what could go wrong with the macaroons if you didn't whip your egg whites enough. And I know this because I scraped my bowl down with a spatula to get every last drop out, and I had this little partial over here. So you can see that blob here, it's like oozed out. It's deflated flat. This one's tall and proud. The rest are really nice. While our macaroons are baking, I'm gonna melt up about 6 ounces of chocolate. I'm using semi-sweet chocolate today, Brian's favorite. But if you want things extra chocolatey, use a bittersweet chocolate, and milk chocolate or even white chocolate if you want things ultra sweet is totally an option too. I'm simmering about 1 inch of water in a pot. I'm using a double boiler for gentle steam heat to melt the chocolate. It's the safest way to not waste expensive ingredients like chocolate. If you want things really quick, go ahead and use the microwave. 50% power in like 45 to 30-second bursts, stirring in between. I actually find this is easier than like opening the microwave and closing it over and over, but both work totally fine. All right, it'll melt up pretty quickly. And you can use more or less chocolate, like they could be completely coated in chocolate or just a light drizzle, it's up to you. Once your chocolate's almost melted through, take it off heat, stop microwaving it, whatever you're doing. Those remaining pieces of chocolate will melt with the residual heat in the surrounding melted chocolate. If you keep heating it up to melt everything, chances are you will burn the chocolate and be sad. No, don't be sad. We're gonna keep this nice and warm just over our pot of hot water off heat until everything's ready to dip. Once they're out of the oven and cool, you have a couple choices. These guys are delicious plain. I am going to drizzle some with chocolate, and I'm gonna dip some with chocolate too. Look at that beautiful golden bottom on here. They both baked up equally golden, by the way, on silicone and on parchment paper. This guy is my little dud. When I scraped all the remaining batter up and I deflated all my egg whites, it just kind of like oozed out, has like kind of burnt edges. That's why we need to whip those egg whites until they are nice and stiff. Just plop that in your chocolate. Then we pull it out like that. And I use my spatula to wipe some of the excess off because I do not want that much chocolate on here. That's gonna overpower the delicious coconut flavor. Place it on and let it set completely. Repeat for the remaining macaroons. So spin it around in the chocolate just to pick some up on the edge. Any extra chocolate you can just remove. And that can go right onto your baking sheet. Instead of, or in addition to dipping, you can also drizzle chocolate over the top. You can either use a spoon or a piping bag like I am. It looks really pretty and you get less chocolate, more coconut flavor, which I like. Once your chocolate's set, these macaroons are ready to enjoy. That is delightful, a chewy, light, cloud-like confection of coconuts with a little bit of chocolate. I hope you get a chance to make this recipe, and if you like this video, check out my coconut playlist.